Yes. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks Food Culture Days for organizing this interesting topic for us. I really adore the team. So thanks Margot, Tali, and Valentina, and all of the others to put together this such amazing and relevant um, festival, biennale, whatever we can call. I'm Caique Tizzi. I'm a visual artist. I'm a cook, and I'm also like what I like to call an event organizer. My practice revolves around an artistic approach to food, um, uh, where like the kitchen is partially like a laboratory, a atelier. I think food is our like deepest connection to land, to earth, and is also our common denominator as humans. We all need to eat. And yes, I um, I prepared a lot of like different notes and different ideas on how to facilitate this conversation. Um, and they're all over the place because I think it's something that's so close to me. So the topic today is like tasting the landscape. How do we reconcile nature and culture? Um, I had a lot of like different ways to entry this topic. But also like at first I think it's interesting that like since we're such a small group and you already like did some like informal presentation of ourselves, maybe like we can introduce ourselves, and then I can go with my thoughts, and like I think it's much more like this is a dialogue, and let's just open and use our times as best as we can. Maybe Hala, since you came earlier and you were telling me about your wheat and corn. I don't know exactly what is there. Uh,
Yeah, here.
tell us what you've been up to in Cairo, Egypt.
Yeah, yeah, I'm a botanist. I'm a botanist. So initially I trained as a botanist, worked as a botanist for a long time, but my interest was more like on the history of plants.
Mhm.
I mean, Egypt, of course, is important. History is important to us, and we have all these archaeology and there's a lot to do about what plants were there thousands of years ago and how did people use them. So in different ways. One of them is food, but what you see behind me here is another way of using the plants in. It's not only decorative; it's pretty, but it's also for bringing good vibes,
Mhm.
good energy. So
Yeah.
we every harvest season, the farmers make these corn dollies. It's a tradition from thousands of years. I've seen it in archaeological sites and so on.
Oh
So
wow.
this one, so I make a point every year to buy a couple of these, give them to my family or friends or so on. And more recently, I've been working on issues related to food. Um, so not only food history, but also the present, how we deal with what we eat and why we eat what we eat, and how does politics interfere with how we handle food, and where is our what is our food heritage? It's very complicated in a country like Egypt that has had many connections over thousands of years. So this is really my interest. I try to make out of it several things. One of them is sharing the information with people. So maybe teaching a course, giving a talk, something like that. Also cooking. So replicating older recipes and also transforming them into what I might think is healthier or
Yeah.
and writing about food. Sometimes activism, food activism, in the sense of seeds, the issues related to seeds, local seeds. Mm, so we've done this for some time with a group, or even directly working on politics in the sense of writing something in our constitution that relates to people's right to good food, to adequate food, to their food sovereignty, how they can, and then try to talk about these things. So I call myself a little bit a food activist in a way. But I'm also very much connected to nature because as a botanist, I this is why I became a botanist, because I like nature. I like to be in nature. And Egypt is a desert country, but funny enough, there is a lot in this nature that you can explore, whether it's a desert or the mountain or the shores of the seas. And sometimes it's I would say not very obvious, which is what makes it precious. You have to look beyond. You have to dig a little bit to find things. You have to go at the right time, because the spring is short, and then the summer comes and everything becomes very dry. Then you have to look in the dryness to see life.
The different shades
Uh,
of dryness.
the different yes, different shades of different levels of dryness. Um, uh, so I so for me it's always like culture and nature, they go together. Some places are very magical and you can see it
Mm-hmm.
immediately. Other places you have to look a little bit. Cities are difficult. I live in a city, in a very big city, very heavy. So I try to create my niche of this small terrace where I'm sitting now, where I have my plants, my corn dolly. It's quiet, it's nice.
A little
Uh,
haven. Yeah.
yeah, you have to, because in the city it's a Kuala Lumpur is nothing compared with Cairo. I know Kuala Lumpur. I've been to Kuala Lumpur several times. It's nothing compared with Cairo. The traffic, the noise, it's a little bit comparable to Brazil in some places.
Mm.
Yeah, I think we're loud.
But yeah, and also people are loud. And this is a Friday morning. Friday morning is very quiet in Cairo, in Egypt in general, because it's a day off and people pray around midday
Mm.
and they get up later, they prepare for the prayer, and then they go to the prayer. It's a calm day, so we've chosen a good day to be on the terrace and talking. Yeah, so
Good
I'm
idea.
really I like the idea of this talk, and I want to listen more.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Hala, for introducing yourself. Zoe, tell us about yourself, why you're intrigued about this topic, and yes.
Sure. Yeah. So my background is in cooking. I'm a chef,
Wow,
and thank you.
lovely.
I've been working in fine dining restaurants for most of my working life. So I'm from Malaysia, from Kuala Lumpur. I grew up here, but went to culinary school in London and have worked in various restaurants around the world. So have spent most of my time working professionally outside of Malaysia. So, culture has always been something that's heavily on my mind as I work abroad, and experiencing other places, other people, other types of cuisines has been a really interesting way for me to be curious about the world. And yeah, I think like being a cook now comes with a lot of like questions of your responsibility to like steward the produce that you've been given, and also just like curating experiences for people in restaurants.
Mm,
So all of that's very interesting to me, and I've always been interested in writing and art. So food culture days has been like an interesting confluence of all of those things for me. Yeah. So very excited to learn from you both as well.
Oh my God, what an amazing group we have.
Yeah, super exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Um, I started taking part of this very interesting. I think it's a nice starting point. I think in terms of this conversation, I I started taking part, like we are only like on the second class of the seminar. It's a seminar organized by a group from London called Graham Ounce and the Institute for Post Natural Studies in Madrid, and they're developing a seminar called Food Cosmogonies. Yeah, cosmogony basically is the I have my notes here. Is it's the storytelling. It's a myth regarding the origin of the universe. Yeah,
Oh.
and if we think of like the multiple ideas of like beginning of civilization and what made us, it always start with our interaction relationship towards nature, which is food, that is our embodiment of nature. And one thing that is I find it really fascinating to think is when we go back to like the Mesoamerican civilizations that we learned to call the Mayans, because there were so many different names and groups. Um, they actually started like what was like the corn that we know, that is like not only their source of food, but their source of like their spiritual relationship to the land, actually originated from something that was not even edible at the beginning. So it was the teosint. I think it's
Yeah.
really teosint. I think it's really interesting that you're here, Hala, to also like help us to navigate into that, because in terms of like the botanical side, I don't know much, but I know what is interesting about the story is that like the plant that we know as the corn, and that is now like basically like a monoculture that is used for so many bad things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was actually like one of these first interventions to like this wild grass located in Mesoamerica, where we call it Mexico today, Guatemala, El Salvador, and it's the teosint, and it was not originally edible. So the relationship, the intervention, and the relationship with and the different ingredients turned into the maize, that turned into the sweet corn and the multiple corns. So like I find it like this example so striking, and could be like a good way for us to think how intrinsic and how nature and culture is all about, because it's about like a food as a word making thing, and the corn then becomes this symbol for a whole civilization, almost like a, not only like as nourishment, as a staple, but also like as a spiritual entity as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Becomes a sacred.
Yes, yes, yes. And then you see in all the uh, different like artistic and symbology and the myths created around that. One thing I think that could be interesting for us to think is like, since we're like geographically located in so many different places, you know, like I think it's like I'm here in Switzerland, but from Brazil, we have you in Cairo and Kuala Lumpur. It's actually like how the geography of a place and the landscape help us to create myths and help us to um, yeah, understand our place in
Place
society.
in the world. Yeah.
Do you think you have like an example to tell us about like a cosmogony from Malaysia or somewhere around there?
Well, I can't like immediately think of any myths. I'm sure that there are some that I'm not thinking of right now, but I've actually been looking into like people growing rice here, like rice farming in Malaysia. It's one of our staple foods, and um, I think okay, sorry. So there's a slight detraction from what you're saying, but relates to like the general topic.
It's a conversation. I think let's try to be like super relaxed about this. Tell us about the rice. I'm super
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, in thinking about what was it, like land or nature in the context of culture, you know, I don't think of them as opposing each other. Like, I think in looking back at like indigenous practices, especially in Malaysia, like they were always in harmony and like culture developed around nature. And I think it's probably very recently, or it would seem to me that it's very recently that those two forces have been, you know, pitted against each other and like trying to control nature through our interpretation of culture. And that's been very clear to me as I'm looking at rice farming in Malaysia. And a lot of like the standout producers that I've been looking at are people who have built their cultures around growing rice and stewarding the land correctly or well, and working in concert with nature. And that's, you know, in contrast to people who are growing that more industrially right now. So that was like kind of the context that I've been in this week, and it was interesting to start this conversation on that note.
Sure. And thanks, Zoe. Hala, you can you tell us some of an idea or like something that is locally from Egypt that would be a good example for us to hear?
Yeah, there are many of these plants, also animals, only plants, that have had this importance beyond their immediate use as food. And sometimes it disappears in the lives of people, and then they come back, they reappear. So I can think of, for example, one plant that looks a little, you know, the cypress papyrus, the papyrus that ancient Egyptians made this paper from, and it continued until the Arabs, they were still making this, and then it became extinct because people were over exploiting it. But okay, let's put the papyrus beside. The papyrus, there's a close relative to papyrus that's called cypress also, but not papyrus. Cypress esculentus. Esculentus means edible, the edible cypress. And this is a plant that grows wild in the marshes. So it would grow in the delta of the river Nile. It would also grow on the banks of the river Nile. And we found the remains of this plant in very old sites, like 18,000 years old sites, which is understandable because this is what was growing. People were eating it. But then it comes back again as a plant that ancient Egyptians were using during this, what we call pharaonic time. They were using to grind and make flour from it and make like a cake from it. And we have a recipe on one of the walls of a tomb in Luxor that explains how you make this cake out of this plant.
Oh, wow.
And then this plant disappears a bit from people's lives. You know, it becomes, because other plants, because we have all these waves of plants coming in, but it remains as in a plant that has a mythological importance. So nowadays, this plant is grown, it's cultivated now in the delta of the Nile, so in the north of Egypt, and it is mainly consumed during what we call the Mulid, which is the birthday of a saint. So the saints have their days, like in the Christian tradition, but these are the Muslim saints, and they have the birthday. And the birthday of a saint, the Mulid, is a festival. People go to the tomb, which is usually the mosque, and they kind of like, it's like eliminate space between the sacred and the profane, because I mean, in the way they dance and they sing and they eat and they meet and and all that, but in the context of we are going to do this in a sacred atmosphere with the saint, and the food that's mainly eaten, found in these festivals is the same plant that we have known for 18,000 years. So it's like, you realize all of a sudden, like, wow, people have not forgotten this plant. This plant is still very important. Must be a reason why it's so important. This is one example, and it's not a very known example because it's not one of these plants that are drawn on the temples that are where the ancient Egyptians are praying to it. Like, for example, the palm, we see it. No, the wheat is the Osiris plant. It's the resurrection plant. So it's known that this is a sacred plant, but it doesn't live on in our tradition. While this Cypress esculentus still lives in our tradition without anybody thinking about it. So it's very real for me. It's a very close connection between this nature and culture that does not disappear with time. Something in the memory of people, of without even telling each other, something remains in their heads that says that this plant is important. This plant I want to consume. This plant is related to a sacred being. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and this is part of what I like to explore. The relationship between the people. Why these plants? Where are they now? What are people doing with them? Can we can we understand more? Can we find other things? So yes, of course, animals also have very important role in the, let's say, the sacred life, or the religious, if you want. This is not, I don't know if you can call it religious, in the mythology of the people in Egypt. Not a lot of it live on because we lost it. I mean, we lost the this the ancient Egyptian traditions, religion. We also lost the language. We don't know how they were speaking. We can read it, but we cannot really. Nobody, because of the changes that happened over the last 2,000 years. So some things that were important were lost. A lot of the traditions were lost. Some of them, like this hypersexuality, lives in the memory of people. This is real. This is very real. It lives in the memory. Cannot erase it.
Yeah, I guess it's somehow embedded in the social fabric, in the stories people tell, in what people see, and yeah, I think it's really embodied somehow, this type of relationships that we have. Yeah, it's super interesting, super interesting.
And Zoe in her work as a cook,
Yeah,
the cook. This is the beginning of a thread that one can follow.
Yes.
I think women are very important in this because women are, in a way, keepers of tradition.
Yeah. Definitely.
They are the keeper of this oral history, and maybe we can still find some things. I mean, we can follow this thread through the cooking.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I think I just want to tell something that, like, also I was thinking and studying recently, and it's from a text called The Cooking Hypothesis, and it says, like, we say a lot that, like, the humanizing process starts with our manipulation with the fire, because through fire we cook food and we digest more, and our brain grew and we became what we became. But there's also, like, an interesting thing to think is the fact that the actually like it is the humanizing process comes with the development of like the first knives, right? So it's the
Yeah.
so
Also,
it's so it's the moment that because like the mankind we didn't have like the features right to like to be carnivores.
yeah.
Uh, our
Mm-hmm.
we didn't have the teeth nor the claws, so like so we developed this very like because like actually like 65% of our forage food at the past it was seeds and fruits and nuts,
Mm-hmm.
so it was actually out of like boredom that like hunting came about. So then it's like because it's not about the meat, it's like the story of the
True.
hero, right? And it's like
Yeah.
a history because it's an idea of like the man going out and showing off and killing animals and developing the swords to kill, the machinery to kill.
Mm-hmm.
And a very interesting author called Ursula Le Guin, she wrote this text, The Carrier Bag, that she says that like instead of telling the story of the swords, the long and hard things, a way to reconcile with nature is to look at things to carry, contain, that has the womb. So it's the carrier bag, having the female
Wow.
as a way to reconcile with this idea of competition, because
Yeah.
most of the elements in nature are not competitive. Nature is collaborating. Nature
Yeah.
is a symbiotic relationship. And there's also like a super interesting saying that says it's from Robin Wall Kimmerer. He tells our relationship to land cannot heal until you hear the stories. Um, so it's just to bring out to you some of the preparations I did to discuss
Nice.
this, like how, especially having two powerful female here with us, to also think,
Powerful.
yeah, I think there's like so many important discourses. I mean, the world is very complicated at the moment. We live multiple
Mm-hmm.
crises at the same time, but there are like positive aspects of it, and I think one of this is
Yeah.
the importance to discuss uh, new narratives, new protagonisms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's time to it's time to contemplate and even on a on organizational levels, there's a lot of talk about changing the way we deal with food production or
Yeah.
deal with
Mm.
nature or um, and in a way I see it as a very positive thing because things we've been talking about for years like the small food producers for example or the local food varieties or the food heritages and important of it comes back because people are worried about their future. They are worried about not getting what they used to get, like this chocolate that came from I don't know what place. Or, yeah, what
Mhm.
if I can't get it? So I have to look into what I have here and work on it. A lot of people are also turning to urban food production, you know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which again a very positive thing to do or even like things related to foraging as you were saying
Yeah.
foraging coming back and just looking around what can I really eat in nature. Hopefully this will continue
Yes.
and will not
Yeah.
disappear when people feel safer again or yeah go back to
Definitely.
their
Yeah.
very consumer attitudes. um yeah.
Yeah. I think I've been thinking a lot as well about, like the changes that everyone is contemplating. And, one of the big ones is how everyone is trying to figure out like what food systems will be sustainable and will be able to feed the number of people that will be, on the earth. And I've been like kind of holding two different like viewpoints in my head of like the things that I read that are more like tech business driven, of like, urban farming and hydroponics and, different ways of raising animals. And there's that like one thing, or like people drinking Soylent, to like sustain themselves. And then on the other hand, I have the very like chef driven ways of like supporting small producers and farmers, and like going back to ways that really nurture the land. And I've been trying to like reconcile these two solutions in my head that feel very different. And I don't know, the solution that I'm landing on for myself and thinking about this is that you need all sorts of like ways of coping with the changes ahead. So yeah, and then also contemplating the roles of women in like dictating where we go, or like being more part of the conversation than we used to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Zoe, as you were speaking, I was thinking how much. I mean, of course, like the COVID crisis has affected everyone in a very remarkable way, but I think the food industry and has been very, very affected. And how do
Yeah,
you think, not only in economically, but I think in rechanging values and ways of being
absolutely.
housed, um, what do you think you and your peers have learned so far with this crisis? Can you share with us?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, I can really only speak for myself, but I really want to believe, and I feel like it's a general movement in the industry, that it was a really, and I guess I can only speak to kind of this segment of restaurants that I'm more familiar with, which is fine dining. But it's been a really humbling experience, of people, my restaurant, the restaurant that I'm attached to, for example, we went from being like a tasting menu kind of place with like 15 courses to serving fried chicken takeout. And I think there's so many examples of that, of like restaurants, with these giant menus pivoting to these like really simple takeout menus that people want to eat on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's, like realizing that, yes, we really appreciate this form of craft and artistry that we have through food, but at the end of the day, we're feeding people. And realizing that restaurants are such a small part of such a big system, and not being able to work with our producers or all the producers that we were used to supporting has been really hard. And seeing our
Yeah.
farmers struggle, seeing our ranchers struggle has been hard. But I think people are becoming more aware of that now, and that there's a little bit more of a dialogue around that, or I want to believe that that's true. Yeah, especially younger cooks coming up now. And I say younger, but I include myself in that. Yeah.
What's the restaurant that you're attached to in Kuala Lumpur? What's the name?
Well, actually, over COVID, I'm back home now. Over COVID, I was with a restaurant called Birdsong in San Francisco.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Bird song. So it's an
Birdsong.
Asian. Yeah.
No, actually, it's kind of like they call it heritage cuisine of the Pacific Northwest. So very like local produce focused, and driven a lot actually by like more traditional methods of cooking, like open fire cooking. And yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I see with great eyes what like this new ways of thinking food.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's so important to go back to basics, and also old new ways of cooking things and
Yeah.
sourcing, um, and relating. I think that's local and seasonal never became so important, not only in trend,
Mm.
but so it's what needs to be, And I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Um, yeah, and also like the same way that we're saying that like the importance of like shifting narratives and give protagonism to other things. It's also like
Mm-hmm.
the idea to diversify also
Yeah.
our palate or our taste, right? Because
Yes.
I mean, of course, I mean, we're really privileged people here discussing these topics, but we can't forget how much people are via advertising, marketing, conditioned to like a specific type of food or just eat very like um, processed and sugars and fat.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a lot of work to do to rethink these landscapes and present these landscapes through a different way. And then Hala, tell us more about your botanicist um, knowledge and yeah, and also like what you been thinking, what's been cooking with this era of transformation that we've been through, and how you relate to uh, your knowledge and the things that you know and you do.
Yeah, yeah. First, first thing is that that came to my mind was that people are cooking more. You know, they're staying at home and they are more interested in cooking, and not just
Mm-hmm.
simple cooking. Those who have never cooked before have started cooking simple foods, but
Yeah.
and some of them are going further, like for example, baking their bread, making their fermented kombucha, and
Yeah.
my it's like that, and this eventually also made them more curious about other recipes, like
Mm.
ancient recipes or, as you said, heritage cuisine.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Mm-hmm.
While before, especially in Cairo, I would talk about Cairo. We have this idea of food trends,
Mm-hmm.
fashion. So every 5 or 6 years or so, there's a trend in the food industry, and it
Mhm.
becomes so in that
Yeah. Very ubiquitous. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then it disappears. Then you disappear. Something else takes over. So it's a bit peculiar, I think, to Cairo in Egypt more than other cities in Egypt, and maybe also peculiar to Egypt a little bit. The fact that they will look out for new things all the time. People
Mm-hmm.
want new things, and it becomes the very, yeah. Have you tasted that? And I know what, like, and then and when it disappears, something else takes over, and so on. This year has not been like that.
Mhm.
We don't have this innovation. We have very little innovation. So they went
Mhm.
back to thinking about, okay, so what were the people eating before? Or okay, I'm bored and I want to try a recipe that my grandmother was making. Or so,
Yeah.
so it became like a social phenomenon. You can, like yeah, younger people making their breads, trying
Weirdo.
out to make sourdough bread.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Take time and effort, and uh, so it's very, very interesting. So from this also, uh, I've I have noticed some documentation of heritage recipes
Mm.
that are new to me. It's very interesting because I've been looking into that for a long time now. Um, so documenting it by videos, this is the easiest way to do it at the moment, yani. But somebody can work on collecting these and making something out of them. Um, in Egypt, there is little. I mean, at least in most of Egypt, there are no forests. People don't go
Mm-hmm.
foraging. They don't looking for mushrooms or this connection is not very strong, understandably.
Mm-hmm.
In some parts, like for example in the mountains in Sinai, in St. Catherine, where there is rainfall and snow in winter, and there's much more water, and the wadis in the mountains could be full of plants in spring and even through summer.
Wow.
And the people living there, they know most of these plants. So they
Mm-hmm.
go out collecting, and many of these plants have uses, either as food, forage, or medicinal plants. So they go out collecting them and using them. Um, so they and it's their culture. It's their culture, really. Some of them are very knowledgeable about these plants. They're like doctors. They heal with what they find. And it's not only plants. For example, they also use the venom of scorpions.
Ah,
Understandably,
Wow.
to be a vaccine for babies. So you extract things
For
from
baby.
animals, from insects,
Yeah.
from
what
arachnids, like
do people do with venom? What do people do with the scorpion's venom?
they they mix it with another plant and water,
Mhm.
and then they give it to babies instead of vaccination. Yeah. But in Brazil, you also have things that are very similar to this with the frogs.
Yes,
With
yes, yeah,
the Yeah, I've
that's,
seen it. I've seen it. Yeah, you
yeah,
take from the skin. It's also a venom. It's also a
yeah,
poison in a way, and
yeah,
then you
Right.
take it for increasing your immunity.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. It's
So this is
fascinating.
what they do. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's like and it continues, and it's not. It has not disappeared because this is a very special part of. They are a little bit. Isolated in a way, and they like their culture. They want to keep their culture. They feel that they are different. They are Bedouins. They and also they feel that they are blessed by the mountains and water and the plants, and they want to let's say give value to to this culture, so they keep it. So these are like different attitudes of people towards um nature or semi-nature, urban nature, let's call it. But definitely connection with the things around us that were not very visible before has increased
Mm-hmm.
tremendously this last year. Also, the amount of people who are buying houseplants. Because I mean, you're staying at home and you have a
Yeah.
small balcony or a big balcony or a garden, and yeah. So my friends who own like a nursery, they say like we are selling, we are overburdened, we are overloaded. They are People want, and because they don't know very much about how to grow their plants, they want to buy more. Plants die, they want to buy more, and so on. But I'm
yes,
sure they're learning. Something good comes out of it.
yeah.
It's actually very, very interesting time. I've been thinking it's a lot of work for social anthropologists.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
I wonder if some of it is like, whether consciously or subconsciously, like people wanting to connect with like older traditions or like, nature and like that being more grounded in a time that is so confusing and like wild. Like everything is just changing around you. And like this is a way to feel less chaotic.
May I
I
share with you some photos from this part of
yes,
Egypt?
please.
I'm gonna try. I know that
There's a
there's a
chat.
share here. Maybe I can share the screen and see if it works.
Yes, let's innovate.
Can you can you
Uh,
see this picture?
no.
No, no.
Uh, Let me see. Because I the only where do you see this? I just see like mic
There's like a
cam.
little tab, yeah, that's like a little screen and a plus symbol, right? Is that the one that you're looking at?
Look, I'm gonna allow it. I'm gonna share screen and I'm gonna allow it. It has to. I share screen. I have to allow it. I have to tell it it's the entire screen. I'll see if
Mm.
Here?
Ah, yeah,
Oh,
it's happening.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
good. So
wow.
this is in this part of Egypt, the Saint Catherine, the mountains, and you see
Wow.
these are like wadis right in the middle of the mountains. It's not very
Amazing.
accessible. You cannot go by car. You have to walk hours to get to these, but people build their gardens, complete gardens around it,
And what do they
using the stones. Sorry.
what type of plants are being
They
cultivated?
grow olives.
Yes,
They
I can see.
grow pomegranates.
Mm.
They grow carob. This very interesting
Mm-hmm.
legume.
Uh-huh.
They grow some apples, almonds. Almonds are very common there. Figs,
Beautiful.
uh, and they grow also vegetables. And these are my friends there, my Bedouin friends. And this is the water. Yeah, it's a little bit tilted. Sorry. The water that comes down. They fill the basin with the water,
Uh-huh.
and then they use the water to grow. In the background, there was a palm. See, they also have palm trees.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
They produce their own dates. And these are some of the wild plants there that they use.
Wow.
And when it's the date season, they have to pollinate it by hand.
Oh, wow.
And then
Wow.
you see this is another wadi, and here you have the date palm trees and a small garden. The gardens
I
are
mean,
so well taken care of.
pollinating
Tell me.
with their own hands. See, I
Yes, they
mean,
have to.
and this
Yeah,
idea like we are separated from nature is so crazy.
yeah. It's amazing. The whole process of pollinating the
Yeah.
date palm. The male is separate from the female, and if you don't do this, you don't get good dates.
Mm-mm.
And it's particular time of year, and somebody has to bring in the pollen grains, the flowers with the pollen grains from one palm, and then go up the palm, the female palm, and place them there,
Oh,
and
wow.
My
cover
goodness.
and leave them, and then pollination happens, and then they have very good dates. And see,
All
this is
right.
the way they grow.
Wow.
They build their walls with the stones. Every stone is chosen, so it
Yeah.
fits with the other stone without mortar.
Yeah.
They don't
Wow.
use mortar. It's a beauty, and this is an
Yeah.
old one, maybe I don't know, 500, 600 years. We still
Yeah.
do it today. It's a
Wow.
lovely,
Indeed.
lovely place. Sometimes you find some archaeological material in
Uh-huh.
these old pottery, ceramics. Some not very old, like a tin. Maybe somebody was, or some glass beads.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing these.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
this
And
is
here are my friends. They're playing a game. They're playing a game with the stones that they collect. It's a bit like don't know, a
how
little bit like chess. Or
wow.
I was thinking, oh my God, this is such a nice peace of mind.
Such an incredible way of life. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow, this is beautiful. This is very
yeah.
beautiful.
So I just wanted to share a little bit with you.
Good.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
And
You're welcome.
how far is it from Cairo? How do you get there? Where do you stay when you go to this type of locations?
It's about 5 to 6 hours drive. You
Mhm.
have to cross the canal, the Suez, actually the Gulf of Suez. The Gulf of Suez is
Mhm.
there's a tunnel,
Mhm.
and then you drive into Sinai for another
Mhm.
3 hours, and then to go to that particular place, it's just you have to go into the mountain for another 15 minutes. It's accessible to some extent.
Right.
Um, this one where I showed you the pictures, but the first picture was in a less accessible area where you have to leave your car and then walk for 3 or 4 hours and get to this
Wow.
wadi with this beautiful garden, lots of water. Uh, so yeah, it's not a day trip, and I go there. I like to go spend some of my summer there.
Wow.
I go. I try to stay for 2 weeks, or as long as I can, and then make these trips while I'm there. And then I used to stay in this eco lodge. We sold part of it. When the Bedouin friends are sitting and playing in the back, there's a
Hmm.
room, and this is an eco lodge that has no electricity. We don't have telephone coverage, and no, and the water comes from the well. So it's the nice clean water that you saw, that comes from the
Hmm.
mountain, goes into the well. So you really are isolated um, voluntarily for as long as you want to stay there. Uh,
A good point to make right now, that it's voluntary isolation.
you don't have to. That's one thing. But and the effect is amazing, because like you in 24 hours you're tuned into the nature
Mm.
around you, and you're much more relaxed, and you do things slowly, and you appreciate what little food we have, and they try also to they are very, very hospitable, and they try to understand what you want, and they serve you what you want. They bake bread every morning, fresh bread. They bake it on a metal surface with the fire
Beautiful.
underneath, so it's a flat bread
It's
with
flat.
Mm.
it's flat with no yeast at all. It's very soft, and they bake it. The men bake it every morning.
Mm.
So nice. Um, yeah, it's just very harmonious in a way. And
Yeah, I think
for
as you
people,
speak,
it's not very easy, but most
but
of my friends, they like it.
But as you speak, Hala, it makes me think that I think there's also with all the new things that are coming to us and new ways of living. I think going back to nature and to the countryside, I think people also understand that question a lot why are we living on top of each other in the cities and so busy and so crazy.
Mm.
Like there's also a tendency or a collective willingness of going towards the land and but not only in a romanticized way but in a
True.
genuine um
Hmm.
Very
we also have a sanctuary, a place in Malaysia that you go that it's like you're connected spiritually, like Hala showed to us. Is there any place there or um, that you can
Yeah,
share?
well, I grew up like really in like kind of city suburban area. But funnily enough, I think yeah. And so like that was never really in my like purview or my view of life to like go out and connect. But even when I was younger, I used to go camping and I would hate it because it was so buggy and there were so many like so uncomfortable. But I think now, as I've grown up a little bit and I've been away from home, and every time I come back, we're really lucky that there are a lot of like parks and reserves in Malaysia, even in the city. So I have found myself going to those places, going on walks like a couple times a week. And that's been a very interesting way of like maintaining sanity.
Yeah,
We have a lot of green areas. So
like
yeah, I'm a little late to the game, but I'm getting there.
yeah. I mean, Malaysia has amazing nature.
Yeah.
It's stunning. It's stunning. Yeah, I had a very
true.
interesting experience when I was there. That we one part of the program that's because we were trying to understand the multi identities of Malaysia because it's a very
Yeah.
interesting multiple country that coexist uh and we had like a few days that we were like in the city and then there were a few days that we went out a little bit on the outskirts but it was like a very
Hmm.
lush tropical area. We
Yeah.
um oh my God, how do you call bandung? No, sorry, I forgot. But we
That's
were,
okay.
ah, yeah,
What was the place?
it was outside. I wish I could pronounce it, but
Okay, that's okay.
it was like a Muslim community, and
Okay.
and we were cooking there, fishing there, and so I made a dinner with people, and and the boys were so helpful, and they were bringing fish for me. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. I remember um, feeling very somehow, because we share the same latitudes, right? I'm from Brazil,
Right.
Yeah.
and
Yep.
I remember going to the markets in Kuala Lumpur, and it was just so amazing. You see
Very
this
abundant. Yeah.
nature screaming, and it's so loud and colorful, and yeah, it might be very inspiring to be a cook there. A lot
Definitely. Yeah.
of
And what do you think about you've been living in Europe for a long time now,
yes,
Caique? Yeah.
yes.
And what
Hmm.
do you think? How do you think Europeans are dealing with mm, perspectives on nature? Or
Wow.
I mean, I mean,
I I mean, I think it's a very complex and good question. Uh, I think some people and some Europeans are pretty woke about sustainability and ecology.
Mm.
Uh, but it's also coming, I mean, I think the Eurocentric vision is always very privileged, right? It's always very
Hmm.
uh, almost condescending sometimes on how people deal with their own lands and develop things. Um, I don't know. I just can't say that it's uh, Brazil is complicated as well, because our country is like so many countries within a place. It's like it's a melting pot. It's
Yeah.
originally, like, we have the indigenous native
Yeah.
Brazilians. Then you have the colonizers, white Portuguese. Then you have the slavery with a lot of the African diaspora is huge, and
Hmm.
then you have the war migration with Germans, Italians, and so it's Japanese. So we have everything there. So it's very it's very interesting for me as a Brazilian to understand Brazil as a non-Western place, uh, especially because it's very driven by Western values.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so it's a tricky conflict for me, and and I feel that the more and more I take distance. I mean, during the lockdown in November, because I was 3 years without visiting Brazil, and I had a nephew that was born, and I the situation in Europe was getting more aggravated. I was let's just go. I went to Brazil. I spent 4 months there doing this period, and I was a lot in nature, of course. Even got a little piece of land there with a group of friends, a sanctuary, like a place to reconcile with
Lovely.
nature.
Hmm.
It made a lot of sense to anchor myself back there.
Lovely.
Yeah, but answering your question, I think the more we look into, without this whole, without romanticizing things, but the more we look into the origins of things and how our ancestors treated land and learned knowledge and created like our culture, more we feel integrated and we want to respect. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
that's what that's why like a festival like this, a Biennale like Food Culture Days, is it's so important and relevant for today's context, because it's very urgent to talk about ways to be in conversation, in relation, in response to nature, and
Yeah.
you know, and understand that we are part of it. We're not superior. We're not. Yeah, I think that's that sentence I said before is very strong. That we are only gonna heal it once we know its stories, and we share the stories, and we go
Mm-hmm.
deep. And there are so many, right?
Yeah.
There are so many, and I feel that like it's complex, but we are the generations to come, they're gonna have to be so adaptable and resilient, and we've always proven to be somehow.
True. Very true.
Look, I am getting like aware of our time because we have 1 hour dialogue, and it's
Yeah.
past 1 hour easily.
That was
uh
very quick.
Quick, maybe we should just like conclude. Maybe we should like exchange contacts, and next
For
time
sure. Yeah.
we are able to travel, and I would love to visit and meet you personally. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's also this thing
Definitely.
that would be great. Thank you so much for joining the conversation, for being interested, and to it was a delight to be with you. And yeah, if you want to send a final message to our people, because people are watching, it would be great. Thank you again.
Oh,
Well,
thank
thank
you.
you both. Yeah. Go ahead, Hala. Sorry.
Just well, I think what you said, Caique, is very very important. This idea of dialoguing and the dialogue and
Mm,
exchange. It's amazing because you discover how connected we all are, and mm, I've heard many
yeah.
many words today that I've been hearing and working on and exploring over the last few years.
Yeah.
So it's really very it's important. It's a bit of a support. It's like it's a support,
Definitely.
and then things come out of it. Things can come out of it. I've actually noted down both your names to me, so I can. So I will check the emails. I guess we
Yeah.
have, yeah, and then it would be nice to stay in touch and hopefully, yeah, hopefully meet in person.
Yes,
Uh,
let's do this chain of affection.
yes,
It's wonderful.
exactly. Very nice.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
nice.
Thank you both so much. It was really wonderful to meet you. And this is just like such great evidence of like the wonderful, um, like I just feel like a sense of hope that there are a lot of people around who care about, these collaborative dialogues. And it's amazing. Like, wow, like what a great time to, be able to connect with people over such important issues. So thank you both.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Have a lovely day.
Pleasure.
Be
Thank you. You
inspired.
too.
You.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
lovely. Pleasure.
Take
Yeah.
care. Bye bye.
Stay in touch. Bye.